with the principals. I am Dr. Sasai, the proud principal of Walker Junior High School.
Good morning. Happy Tuesday that feels like a Monday. I am proud principal of Kennedy High School, Poppy Hill-Bonales. It's very nice to see you guys here today. I think that probably people's spirits have been dampened by the weather and some pending rain that might be coming at about 10. So that might have stopped some people from coming in person. Hopefully, we have a bunch of people joining us online. Welcome if you are joining us online.
And remember, if you miss this presentation, it is also being recorded on YouTube and will be shared later. We also want to welcome today Mr. Ron Hoshi, Assistant Clerk to the Board of Trustees.
Woohoo!
Thank you for being here today, and all of our families who are here, thank you for being here. As you remember, the microphones are for online so that they can hear, so it does not project anything here in person. So
It's okay. Dr. Sasai and I are both loud, so it'll
yes,
be okay.
we might be small, but we are loud.
Yes.
So we're going to go ahead and we have a special guest speaker today, which David will introduce in a little bit, but we want to go through our announcements before we have our speaker today. So again, I am Dr. Sasai. Today, interpreting is our Walker Faces. You know, Miss Puente. So she is going to be interpreting today.
And then there I am. And then here is our incredible family and community engagement specialist, Mr. David Hernandez.
Your favorite son.
Your favorite son, yes.
Okay, so we're going to go through some of our upcoming events. Let's go ahead and start with Kennedy.
So we have a... Refresh it. Just kidding.
One moment, please.
Technical difficulties. Please hold while your party is reached.
We will, okay. We're going to pause for a second and,
It's refreshing here. Perfect.
And then if you go back here, right?
Sorry, guys.
And then go up to present. Right.
she can't reach it.
Aha!
Thank you.
It is the tall crew up here, for sure. Okay, we're going to start first with today. So we have a Lunar New Year event, 12:30 to 1:30 at the Kennedy Family and Community Engagement Center. That is room 901. So we want you to come over and see the incredible Lunar New Year display that is right outside of the 901 area. And then there is also going to be some other activities and events going on today at 12:30. So we would love for you to stop by to see that. Remember, if you have your parent ambassador's badge, you wear that badge, come in through the office, and no need to get a visitor's pass then because you're not a visitor anymore. So incredible opportunity for you. I also want to let you know that there is a school site council meeting that is next Wednesday. It is our last school site council meeting, easy for me to say, for this year where we can spend this year's money. It is not our last school site council meeting, but we are going to be spending categorical monies for the last time this year because of the due date. So we'll see if we have a lot of expenditure requests there for that. And then we want to remind everybody that we have our LCAP meeting also next week, next Thursday coming up. Remember, if you attended at the previous LCAP meeting, we were all working together on LCAP Goal 3. This time, we will be all working together on LCAP Goal 2, and I want to plug your attendance at that one. The reason why is because LCAP Goal 2 is all about parent and family engagement. And so having parents' voices when we are refining a goal about parent voices seems to me like it would be really important. So I think even if you had not come to previous ones, this might be a really, really great one to attend. We need your voice at this one to make sure that we are doing right by our Walker and Kennedy community.
So if there's no other meeting you can go to for LCAP, this is the one we need you at.
Unfortunately, this is not the one that had tacos. That was also the one that you should have attended. But this one is equally as important.
So please come if you're available so we can hear your voices.
That's already there. We talked about that. Oh, this is a big one. Coming up,
Okay.
save the date.
So our open house, so Kennedy already had their open house in January. We will be having ours on March 11th. It is also going to be a minimum day. We are doing it similar to Kennedy, and we're having an expo style. So we will have different departments out for you to visit. We also are doing a market day. So our students will be creating their own products to sell. So we have many entrepreneurs at our school. So if your student is an entrepreneur and has goods, products to sell, we will have an opportunity for them to sell at our market day at our open house. So that's going to be from 6 to 7 p.m. all around campus. And it is right after daylight savings, so it will be sunny at that
Yay.
time. We once made the mistake of having it before and it was completely dark. So we have learned, and it will be when it is sunny. So we hope you'll be able to join us.
So bring your money, right? For all the entrepreneurs selling
Yes.
their goods, bring your money.
Yes.
Bring the
And they
cash.
probably also take Venmo, because these kids have Venmo, it
'Cause
seems.
they're, yeah.
Or Zelle. They
Yeah.
have Cash App. They have all kinds of things
have all
that
the
we don't
things,
even know
okay.
what they are, but they apparently know.
Yeah.
Okay, so here is the bus schedule. Remember, going back to LCAP, so if you do not want to drive down to the district office, the bus does pick up at Kennedy High School. You just need to walk across the street right over here, and it will pick you up at 5:15, and it will take you back
You don't even need to walk.
afterwards.
You can park over there if you want. I mean,
So if you'd like to go. And then here's again our open house flyer. And then I also want to let you know tonight we do have our memorial concert for our beloved band teacher, Mrs. Massey, who sadly passed away in November of cancer. So at 6 p.m. tonight, her students from Walker and Kennedy will be honoring her tonight with a performance that they created and produced. So there will be speakers and there will be music, some original pieces that they wrote just for her. So if you are available, the concert is free. It's tonight at 6 p.m. at KPAC. I am going to now turn it over to David, who's going to introduce our guest speaker for today.
David, you can't use that walker microphone.
use
That's
both
the
of them.
wrong one. That's the wrong one.
David, use both of them.
In accordance with the 6-year plan, I'm going to use both mics. We're a 6-year school. We're across the street, so I'm going to need the clickers. Okay. Cool. So we have a special presentation for you today. We've invited Laura's House, which is one of the organizations and they're having the cutting edge, most well-known organization based on domestic violence. They have a couple shelters that we've even referred families to. So they've been a great help. So we wanted to invite them today for a workshop. We'll be going over healthy relationships and teen dating violence. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to y'all Reagan Orloff from Laura's House. While she presents, I'm going to really quickly transition. So just give us 1 minute. Thank you.
Pick which mic you would like. Pick your favorite one. Oh, very good. Thank you.
I gotta say, I've presented to some classes at Walker, so
Yes, you have.
Dr. Blackshear, my fave.
Yes, you have. For health class.
But I love them both.
What's happening back there, David?
We're gonna really quickly switch over to my presentation. But just to quickly introduce myself again. So my name is Reagan Orloff, and I am the bilingual education and outreach specialist with Laura's House. So we are a domestic violence agency, as David mentioned. And so we were started in 1994, and we offer a variety of services to anyone experiencing abuse in their relationships. So we offer emergency housing, transitional housing, therapy services, case management, legal advocacy. And about 10 years ago, we created my department, which is the education and outreach team. The reason that we created the education and outreach team is because we realized that in order to really address the issue of domestic violence in our communities and hopefully prevent it from continuing to repeat itself in generation after generation, is through talking about it with our community members. So we actually created a comprehensive curriculum for students, for youth, and also for parents and adults. So any community group in the county can really reach out to us to give these presentations. They're free of charge. We offer them in English and Spanish, in person or online. And one of our kind of capstone presentations that we offer for students and parents alike is that of healthy relationships. Because we realize that in order to understand when we may be falling into an unhealthy situation, it's important for us to learn about what a healthy situation looks like, right? I think for many of us, we learn about relationships through direct but also indirect means, right? We may learn about how to act in a relationship in our communities, in our families, through what we see on TV, online. It's kind of rare for us to sit down and have a healthy relationships 101 class, right, when we're young. And so we've realized that that's such an important conversation that we can all have with our families, with our students, and not just with romantic relationships, but between classmates, between friends, between family members. So it's really where our idea for this curriculum has begun. But we also do presentations on teen dating violence overview and also a variety of interrelated topics as well, such as empowerment and self-esteem, stress and self-care, online safety and social media responsibility, human trafficking, just to name a few, anti-bullying, bystander intervention, because understand how all of these really interrelate to these mental tools that we can build to engage in healthy relationships throughout our community. And so when we talk about relationships, really the main cornerstone of understanding a relationship, whether it's healthy, unhealthy, or falling into abusive territory, is through this relationship spectrum. And we really want to talk about this idea of power and control. Because in a healthy relationship, again, not just romantic relationships, but between classmates, between coworkers, between friends, we see that there's a balance of power and control. Both people in a relationship, in a friendship, in a party, right? They both are equally empowered to share what's on their mind, assert personal boundaries, and communicate when something upsets them, right? And when a conflict arises, because it does in healthy relationships, right? In all relationships, there's conflict. Both people work together to find a solution, right? It's a collaboration. They're working as a team. There's that balance of power and control. But when a relationship starts turning into unhealthy balance of power and control is when we see that it's sort of teetering back and forth. So when there's a conflict between two people, instead of collaborating to overcome the argument, they may be competing to see who will beat the other one in the argument. So I think sometimes with our students, they've experienced things like this, and all of us have, honestly, right? Sometimes maybe someone upsets us, and instead of telling them, hey, you upset me, let's talk about it, maybe we give them the silent treatment for a week. Maybe we kind of, don't respond to their texts right away. And then the other person might see that and think, okay, this person is kind of giving me the cold shoulder. What can I do in response? And sometimes instead of going, let me talk to this person and ask what's wrong, maybe I'm going to try to show them that I know in another passive aggressive way. Maybe I'll post on my Instagram story that I'm hanging out with all of our friends without them. Right? That's something we sometimes see, unfortunately, between students, right? And so that's when there's that unhealthy balance. But both people are kind of vying back and forth to get it. When we talk about abusive relationships, that's when that imbalance of power and control establishes and stagnates like this. So one person has all the power and control, and the other person doesn't have any. This is something that happens over a period of time. So it's not to say that the person down here doesn't try to stand up for themselves, doesn't try to regain power and control. But every time this person tries to come up here and regain their power and control, the other partner, the abusive partner, is going to up the ante, find more intense and aggressive ways to maintain that power and control over another. And so after a while of time, we see that this partner that is receiving the harm, they realize that it might be safer for them or just easier for them to accept this position and stop trying to fight back. And then over time, it just becomes this feedback loop that it establishes and establishes. And that is when our clients come to us, right? After a period of time of being relegated to this position without power and control. And so, of course, our job in the education and outreach and prevention department is to teach our community members, teach our students, right, how to avoid falling into this, right? How to tell when we might be going into this, and how to empower ourselves to always stick with this, right? To always try to maintain that equality of power and control. So the three components of a healthy relationship that we talk about in our presentations is trust, respect, and safety. That can look different to everyone depending on their comfort levels, their personal boundaries, but they're so important, right? They each are kind of those core elements that if you take one of them away, you may no longer have a healthy relationship. And so when we think about trust, I don't know if anyone wants to share what trust may look like to them in a relationship, in a friendship. How do we show trust? How do we practice trust? If anyone wants to share, I don't know if this is like a sharing situation, but I can give you the mic, get a little famous. What does trust look like to you? Anyone? Yay, thank you. Okay, what does trust look like to you?
When you blindly believe that the other person, no matter what you say or think, won't make you feel like attacked, or you feel safe to express yourself in any way you can.
Absolutely, that's a great one. So being able to trust that you can tell this other person your personal secrets, maybe, things that make you uncomfortable, but they're not going to judge you for that, right? They'll accept every part of you. So that's a great option, right? Trust can also be believing that someone's being honest with you, right? So the basic is just someone's not lying to you, someone's being loyal to you. But trust could also look like, if you lend them your things, that they'll take care of them, that you trust them, that when you hang out with them, when you spend time with them, they're not going to put you in uncomfortable situations. So we see how trust, respect, and safety really overlap. Because when we think about respect, of course, that one's really important. We want to have mutual respect, that everyone's allowed to have their own opinions. Everyone's entitled to their own beliefs. We don't belittle someone for disagreeing with us. We also respect personal boundaries, right? So if someone says, I'm not comfortable with PDA at school, the other person says, okay, no worries. Or for some of us, we're huggers and some of us aren't huggers, right? Just respecting that. Hey, you know what? I don't really like hugging. Okay, no worries, right? And also being aware of your tone of voice when you talk to someone. So that's a way to respect someone else, right? Not yelling at them, not using harsh language, not making jokes that put them down. That's forms of respect as well. And then safety, right? Safety is so important because on the other side of things, when we give our presentation about teen dating violence to teenagers and we talk about red flags, so red flags, they're sort of warning signs in a relationship that maybe it's not the healthiest. The number one red flag that we want people to look out for is fear, right? And fear can manifest in a lot of different ways in a relationship. It's not always the very obvious fear for your physical safety, but it can be anxiety, right? Maybe you're nervous to tell your partner that you need to cancel plans because something came up with your family. Maybe you're worried that your partner's gonna lash out at you if you give them bad news. Maybe you're afraid to let your walls down around them and be yourself and have a bad day because they're always the ones who need comforting, right? And they aren't gonna like it if the roles switch. These are all kind of forms of a lack of safety. So when we talk about how do we implement safety, that looks like exactly feeling like you can be yourself even on your worst days, that this person will love you even in your failures, that this person will never threaten you or hurt you physically or emotionally, right? There's emotional safety, feeling like you can share your emotions without being shut down. And so again, we can see how these sort of they don't exist in a silo, they all interact, but having all three of these elements is so important. And so we do a lot of activities with our students talking about, what do these look like to you? What are examples, right? And by establishing understanding what healthy relationships look like, again, I really keep driving this home, but it's because we really want to make sure that hopefully they are learning how to engage in healthy relationships throughout their lives. So really quick, we'll go over teen dating violence. And actually, February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. And so us at Laura's House, we are spearheading a really cool county-wide student-led activity awareness month, where we've invited a bunch of different schools to put on activities at their school about healthy relationships. And we've created, these cute little stickers that we've been giving out to students. And we created that February as Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, we're gonna focus on healthy relationships, right? But to understand what teen dating violence is, it's sort of interesting, right? Because I'm sure not many of you knew that February was Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. It's not so well known. But actually, it was created by law to become an awareness month nationally because it is a prevalent issue. And many people don't realize that, right? So teen dating violence is any type of abuse that takes place within a dating relationship among adolescents. So that's defined as 12 to 18 years old. And there are 8 different kinds of abuse that we talk about in our programs. There's verbal, emotional, physical, sexual, financial, mental, cyber, and spiritual. There's a lot of different forms of abuse beyond just what we usually see in the media, which is physical, right? There doesn't have to be physical abuse present for a relationship to be abusive. But oftentimes we don't see these forms of abuse working in a silo. Oftentimes they're working together. Emotional, mental, verbal is all gonna work together, right? But there's a common societal attitude that middle school youth are too young to learn about dating violence because they're not dating yet, even high school youth, right? And it's hard to bring up, these very serious conversations with our kids, right? We want to protect them. But the few studies that have actually examined the risk for teen dating violence found that 1 in 5 tweens, so those aged 11 to 14, say their friends are victims of dating violence. And so we see that in the younger adolescent age, we're seeing 1 in 5 kids experiencing some form of violence in their relationships. I'll be a little vulnerable here. In 6th grade, I had my first boyfriend. We maybe walked to class together. I hung out with him one time outside of his school. His mom baked us cookies. We hugged. Pretty big deal. But when I was in middle school, not too long ago, there were a lot of people in relationships. And I was already feeling the pressure of, in 6th grade, what are you gonna do? I'm like, what do you mean? We're gonna play video games and eat his mom's cookies, right? But I think also with the rise of social media, and this is something we talk about with our youth as well, we're kind of being exposed to different ideas of what's normal in a relationship. Sometimes media, I think we can agree, is not always the healthiest. Some of the shows are not portraying the healthiest behavior. So, once we get into the older adolescence range, so anyone 18 or younger, according to the National Teen Dating Violence Average, 1 in 3 teenagers experience harm in dating relationships prior to age 18. So by the time they graduate high school, we're seeing 1 in 3 teenagers reporting experiencing some form of abuse, which is extremely high, right? And so that's why we create this curriculum. Because when we created our education and outreach department here at Laura's House, we wanted to understand how this issue is taking place here in Orange County. And so we actually partnered with Chapman University to create a study of Orange County teen dating violence. Chapman University surveyed a variety, hundreds, thousands, I don't even know. They surveyed a bunch of Orange County teenagers and asked them about teen dating violence here in Orange County. And actually what they found is that in Orange County, 2 out of 3 teenagers experienced at least one type of harm in relationships prior to the age of 18. So that's actually higher than the national average here in Orange County. I think it's interesting that we use the word harm here because sometimes I think for people, for youth and adults alike, it's difficult to admit or to accept I've been abused, right? That's a tough word to hear. But when we frame it as harm, right? Has anyone ever manipulated you? Has anyone ever forced you to do an intimate act you weren't comfortable with? Has anyone ever threatened you, right? Once you start using those specific examples, more teenagers tend to speak up. So I think that's sort of partially why our numbers are higher than the national statistic, but it's still something to be very aware of as a county, right, as Orange County. And so that's why we create a variety of different activities, and especially we've gone really hard this month in February for Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month by including the students to talk about healthy relationships. How can we prevent falling into unhealthy relationships? We've had some really cool success so far, and the month is only halfway done. This week I'm going to like a bunch of different school activities. So we've had, different clubs and student governments across the county making awareness posters. This is one of our activities that we do, trust, respect, and safety. We have the students write, what do those look like to them, right? We also offer parent workshops. So this is our empowerment and self-esteem workshop that I gave last week, but we related it back to Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month, right? Because oftentimes talking about healthy relationships is going to start in the home. How can we love ourselves? How can we build our mental resilience and our self-esteem to know when someone is crossing our boundaries, to know when we deserve to be treated better, right? We don't want to fall into the low self-esteem, falling for poor relationships, right? And then here are a few other options that different schools, these are all student-led activities, which is really cool. I created a sort of like Jenga game, so if you know the Jenga tower game, but on the blocks we wrote, different boundaries, or we have a trust, respect, and safety, or red flags. And so they're playing Jenga, but it's like healthy relationships Jenga. And just a lot of cool stuff, making Valentines, self-love, and healthy relationship Valentines. So we've been really, we really try to get into the community and talk about healthy relationships and how can we build those, because the overarching hope is that once our youth have an established understanding and education of that, they can better realize when they might be falling into an unhealthy situation. And so here, now we'll just go over a few different things we talk about in our healthy relationship presentation, right? Because what else can we do? What other strategies can we implement to practice and maintain healthy relationships? Of course, one of the big ones is effective communication. So in effective communication, we want an exchange of information. Again, both partners have that equality of power and control, where both of them can share how they're feeling, but also both of them are listening to the other person. One person isn't dominating the conversation, right? And so both people are sharing information, but also both people are actively listening to the other. So listening is a huge part of effective communication, right? I think sometimes when we're in a conversation, or maybe when we're having a bit of an argument, the other person is making their point and we're too busy thinking about what our next point is to really be present and listen to what they're saying. So a big part of effective communication is being present. And always leading with empathy, trying to understand the other person's perspective and emotions. So one kind of catchphrase that we use a lot in my line of work is understanding is not agreement. So you don't have to agree with someone to understand their perspective. Maybe someone says, hey, that joke you made last week, it really hurt my feelings. And you think to yourself, girl, that joke was funny. Like if someone made that joke about me, I think it was funny. My feelings wouldn't be hurt. But what we try to teach people is, you don't respond with that. You don't respond with, you're just too sensitive, it's a joke, right? But we understand, hey, maybe I don't agree. Maybe I don't think my joke was not funny. But if this person's perspective is that it did hurt them, then I need to accept that, right? I need to understand. I don't agree, but I understand. So that's sort of the effective communication overview. We also talk about nonverbal communication, because a huge part of healthy communication is not even things that you're saying, right, with your words. We want to be mindful of our facial expression when we're in conversations, right? For some of us, it might be a little hard. Some of us, we share our emotions on our face, right? You're listening to something, you're like, no. We want to be a little cognizant of that. Can be difficult. Something we got to work on. I know, I'm hearing some laughing. Same. Clock it, for real. So, yeah. We want to be aware of facial expressions, right? We also want to be aware of our eye contact. Eye contact is an interesting one, though, because depending on who you're talking to, eye contact may be respectful, or it might be overwhelming, might be too much. We want to be able to show that we're listening and that we're attentive, so oftentimes eye contact helps. But if you're ever in a situation where eye contact may feel a little too intense, I think for some of our kids, like it can feel a little interrogating to be like, let's sit at the kitchen table and talk. So sometimes actually studies show that other effective means of talking things out is going on a walk. You're walking side by side with someone, you're not necessarily facing them in eye contact, but you're having this quality time together and you're moving your body, which kind of helps your brain process information. And so that's an option, right? Sometimes I feel like the easiest time to talk to my mom is when we're driving. Like she's driving and I'm sitting in the passenger seat and the words just start flowing because it's a little more of a natural situation. I'm not like staring at her, she's not staring at me. So again, eye contact. It's more important that we're showing that we are in a space where there's no distractions. We're not checking our phone, we're not spacing out, right? We're doing some sort of activity with them or we're sitting with them. And then of course that leads into posture. We want to make sure that we are showing with our body language that we are listening, that we are involved, right? We're not disconnected, we're not over it, right? Also, nonverbal communication can be how we can see how the other person is reacting to what we're saying. So it also has to do with emotional intelligence to be able to say, okay, this person, they're starting to lose eye contact with me. They're kind of starting to retreat a little bit physically. Maybe this person's getting uncomfortable with what I'm saying. Let me check in. So there's a lot that we can learn from nonverbal communication and how to communicate effectively. And so we don't have to get vulnerable today, but just for y'all to think about it, can process. This is something that we ask our students, we ask our parents whenever we give this presentation, right? What is one positive communication trait you use when talking to others? And what is one trait that you might need to work on, right? It's actually interesting because I find that when I work with youth, it's easier for them to think about the positive trait, and sometimes it's a little harder for them to think about the improvement. When I work with parents, oftentimes the easier one for them to think about is what they need to improve on. And sometimes it's harder for parents to say a positive trait, because I think sometimes we're so hard on ourselves, right? But we want to model that behavior that we can be aware of our strengths and our weaknesses, right? We can be proud of ourselves. We have that self-care, because that's how we imbue that healthy relationship with ourselves into our kids. And so I talked a lot about boundaries. Personal boundaries are simply the lines we draw for ourselves in terms of our level of comfort around others. We'll skip that. So there are 4 different boundary categories that we talk about in our curriculum. Emotional boundaries. So that is going to be, what are you comfortable with emotionally, right? What are some topics that might be off limit to you? What are some things that you will discuss or not discuss? It can also be emotional safety. So, please don't make jokes that roast me. Don't make jokes that belittle me. That hurts my feelings. Please don't, talk to me in that tone. If you start yelling, I'll leave the conversation. Those sort of things. There's time categories of boundaries, or time boundaries, excuse me. And so that could just be, how are you using your time and setting limits on how you use your time. If you continuously show up late, I'm going to have to stop making plans with you. If you need to cancel plans, please let me know at least 1 hour in advance. Or after 8 p.m., I don't respond to texts and calls. Trying to get ready for bed. On Sundays, that's my family time. So sorry, I can't make plans on Sundays, right? So it's just how are we using our time and making sure that we're carving out time for all of our needs. Material boundaries is with our possessions. So a great example I do for this, especially with the kids, I'm like, raise your hand if you have a phone. And they're all like, yeah. Raise your hand if you have a password on your phone. Yeah. And then I go up to one, I'm like, hey, can I look through your phone right now? They're like, no. That's a boundary. That's a material boundary, right? What are we comfortable with our possessions? Are we comfortable sharing our passwords, letting random people go through our phone? My dad is like really into his car. He's like, no food in the car. That's a material boundary, right? If I lend you something, please don't break it. Give it back to me when you're done. Ask before you take it. Material boundaries. And then, of course, physical boundaries. What are you comfortable with physically? I'm not comfortable with PDA, public displays of affection. Physical boundary. I'm not a hugger. Physical boundary, right? I'm not ready to do that act yet. physical boundary, right? And it's so important that we respect each other's boundaries because it helps us to feel more comfortable with the other person and to feel safer in relationships. But the thing about boundaries that we always have to remind our youth and ourselves is that they're not simply a request. Hey, can you please respect my boundary? But if not, it's okay. It's okay. No. Boundaries, we have to stay really steadfast in them, right? Because if someone crosses our boundary, we need to know how we're going to respond. Sometimes people cross our boundaries on accident, right? And that's okay. We talk to them about it. We say, hey, I told you that I don't like when you make jokes at my expense. And last night around our friends, you were doing that, and it made me feel bad. And if you continue doing that, we might have to have a conversation about our relationship. And that person goes, okay, I'm so sorry, you're right, you're totally right, you mentioned that, my bad. But some people, they're doing it on purpose, right? They're kind of seeing what kind of boundaries they can cross, how far they can, make you go back on your boundaries. That's when we can start getting into that unhealthy and abusive situation. And so it's so important we talk about boundaries, not just what are your boundaries, but what do we do if someone violates our boundaries? With different people, we have different boundaries. We have different ways that we assert our boundaries. It's important that we communicate our boundaries. We can't assume that people will read our minds and know what our boundaries are. But they're so important. They're really so important in healthy relationships, right? And then finally, we talk about conflict resolution a lot in our curriculums. And it's really important, first of all, that when we get into a conflict, emotions run high, right? We may feel very angry. Not to say that anger is invalid, but oftentimes when we enter a conflict, an interpersonal conflict with someone else, anger is sort of a secondary emotion, meaning that often we're angry because there's some other feeling under the surface, right? And so when you are angry because of a conflict, we can ask ourselves, why am I feeling this way? It might be because actually we're hurt. Right? This person hurt us and now we're angry. It's hard to be vulnerable sometimes and say, you hurt me, so instead I'm just going to be angry. Maybe we feel out of control of the situation and we need to regain control. Maybe we're insecure. Maybe we're hungry. Maybe we're tired, right? And so again, when we approach conflict, we always want to have that empathy and that understanding of intent versus impact. So sort of like what I talked about earlier, I may not agree with why you're upset, but I'll understand it. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings, but I did, and so I'm going to take responsibility for the impact, even if it wasn't my intention, right? So when we're in conflict, we want to be sure to avoid withdrawing. So that's when, if we become overwhelmed with the situation, we just completely dissociate and take ourselves out of the conflict. It's not a bad thing to have to take a moment. If you ever feel like you need to take a minute to process your emotions after a conflict happens, that's okay. But we want to clearly define that, right? So, my emotions are really intense right now after what happened. Can we please take a few hours and talk about this after dinner? Or, I'm really stressed at work today. Can we talk about this when I get home? So it's okay to take a break from a conversation and come back to it, but we want to define when we're coming back to it, and we want to communicate why, or else we're just going to be like withdrawing and avoiding the conflict, which isn't great. We also want to avoid flooding. So flooding refers to, maybe some of y'all can relate, I think a lot of us, sometimes this happens, where maybe we share something, hey, yesterday you said this thing to me and it really hurt my feelings. And then this person comes back at, well, last week you did this, this, and this, and it all hurt my feelings. So really, the only reason I acted this way is because you acted that way. And they start flooding with all these other issues, right? Until the conversation, you no longer know what's the point of the conversation, right? It gets very confusing. Again, not to say that that person's issues are not valid, but every conflict needs to be brought up in its own time. We can't weaponize the times that someone hurt us to excuse when we hurt that person. We can take accountability for when we hurt someone else and then still, tell them, but you hurt me a different time, but different conversation, right? We want to make sure we're not flooding the conversation with all these different instances that had never really been processed. Because that leads to blaming, which of course we want to avoid as well. We really want to avoid blaming the other person, accusing them. A lot of times with conflict, especially loved ones, with conflict, right? We love this person, we care about this person, and we know this person cares about us. So we kind of have to give them the benefit of the doubt when entering conflict to say, okay, maybe this person didn't mean it. I want to come from a place of curiosity and ask, okay, hey, just wondering, you hurt my feelings, but I'd like to understand, what your thought process was when you said those things or when you did those things. Versus, you did this and you did it on purpose and you meant to hurt me and this and that, right? We want to come from that place of vulnerability rather than accusing the other person. We also want to be conscious of course, the environment and the time in which we're having this conversation. When a conflict happens and we need to find a time to resolve it, we don't want to do it right in the morning when we wake up and we haven't had our coffee yet, right? Or when we're rushing to get the kids ready for school. We don't want to do it when we're both really hungry, we haven't eaten all day. Hey, that's a great time to have a sensitive conversation, right? And control our emotions. This is a lot with like students as well. Sometimes when I would come home from school, I was tired, I was hungry, and my mom would be like, so how was your school day today? And ask me a bunch of questions, and I just get overstimulated. I'm like, please, just give me a minute. Right? So being conscious of that, because that can always impact our ability to have a stable conversation. And then, of course, the tone of voice that we're using with the other person. When we think about conflict resolution, there are instinctive kind of responses that each of us may have. These are biological mechanisms that we can't really control at their base. This was back when we were like, our ancestors got hunted and stuff back in the day. But a lot of us still find this when our body feels that we are in danger. And a lot of times, the stress response to being in conflict, even if it's just a verbal conflict, still kind of triggers this conflict response, right? So you may have a fight response in which when you feel that you are being attacked, when you feel that you are in conflict, your first instinct may be to get aggressive, right? To prove your point because you want to gain back control of the situation. So you may raise your voice. You may start trying to kind of bulldoze the conversation and say, this is right, I'm right, just listen to me, accept it. Of course, that's not great because it's hyper-aggressive, defensive, and it actually escalates the response, right? But some people respond to conflict with flight, right? So when you're in conflict, you just want to get out of it. You just want to avoid. So those people, when a conflict happens, they're just going to ignore it. They're going to bottle it up. They're not going to talk about it. But that's not healthy either because you're just kind of building up that resentment. You're not communicating the problem. And so then the other person can't fix the problem either because they don't know what upset you in the first place. So, you may say you're done before the conflict is resolved. It's not effective conflict resolution. And another form is freeze, right? So some people, they freeze in a conflict. Their body their nervous system kind of tells them two different things. On one hand, they want to speak up for themselves. On the other hand, they're scared and they want to run away. So they kind of just collide and you become paralyzed and you don't know what to do. A lot of times that is bookmarked by after the conflict happens. You may look back and think, oh, I wish I had said that or done that. So that could mean that maybe you tend to freeze in a conflict, right? You may not be able to articulate a response in the moment. The thing about all of these instinctive responses is it's okay if you feel that coming on during a conflict, because again, it's a biological mechanism. But we want to understand how can we bypass that instinctive response so that we are resolving conflict in a healthy way, right? We may feel angry right when a conflict happens, or scared and want to leave right when a conflict happens, or we might just freeze up when a conflict happens. But that's why it's so important to allow ourselves to have those boundaries and communicate, hey, I tend to get really angry when something happens to me, so I'm going to need a bit of time to process before we go into this conversation. Or I tend to freeze, so I might need a minute to process my words. Please don't interrupt me because I'm trying to get my words out. So we try to find these ways to make us feel safer during conflict so that we don't fall back onto these instinctive responses. Because by bypassing those instinctive responses and focusing on seeking a solution, focusing on empathy, on trying to understand the other person's point of view, we can better resolve that conflict, right? Because really, when we are resolving conflict, having that conversation, we want to find the real issue We want to really be vulnerable and explain why something hurt us. And sometimes, it's not even necessarily that we want a behavior changed. We just want our feelings validated. Have you ever had that? It's like you're upset with someone. It's like, you don't have to change anything, but I just want you to say that you're sorry. And that's totally okay. Sometimes we just need to feel validated and then everything's fine, right? But also, it's important to say that agreeing to disagree is not a failure. That in and of itself can be a solution in a conflict. Again, understanding is not agreement. Maybe we just agree that we have different opinions on a subject or we have different approaches to a subject, and we respect the other person, but we're not changing our own opinions, and that's okay, right? But if there is something to change, if there is a behavior to change, we want to find a mutually agreeable compromise. So we want both people kind of compromising and maybe making some changes, accepting different things. We don't want one person to make all the sacrifices all the time and the other person to never bend or be flexible, right? Because that's when we're starting to see that imbalance of power and control. We want both people to feel like they are heard and listened to. Again, this is with some nuance. If one person clearly messed up and they're clearly at fault and they accept that, then they can say, hey, I'm going to change going forward. That's okay. But if it becomes a pattern of behavior, if this person always has to take the blame and always has to be the one changing, that's when we start seeing that imbalance of control. Because an abusive relationship, it's not just a one-time thing. It's a pattern of behavior, right? So that's what we really want to focus on with the conflict resolution. And so with that is just sort of an overview of our healthy relationships. Again, my name is Reagan, and I work with Laura's House. For more information, more resources, you can reach our website. We also have a 24-hour hotline. So if anyone ever needs services, direct services with us, emergency housing, therapy, the whole lot, they can call our 24-hour hotline. It's confidential, and they can be connected to our services. I have some cards I can pass out at the end for that. And yeah, we offer a variety of these presentations. Hopefully to the county, to your youth, to you, whatever. And that's sort of an overview. So thank you so much for your attention. And if y'all have any questions or comments, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Where is your home base?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, this is like an outdated slide. Usually it shows our addresses and our hotline. So we actually have two different offices. Our headquarters is in Aliso Viejo in South County, but we actually have an office that we opened in Garden Grove, so pretty close to here in North County. Both of those offices offer all of our services. Anyone can make an appointment at either of those. But yeah, so we have those two offices. And my team, we travel to schools across the county to...
You service all of Orange County?
Yes, we service all of Orange County. Honestly, anyone can call our hotline, even if they're not from Orange County. But if they do want to receive our services, they have to come into Orange County because that's where our shelters and our offices are. Of course, our emergency shelters, we don't disclose the location of those. Those are secret. I don't even know where they are. But, so yeah, anyone can reach out for help. But we
have overnight facilities too for people who are experiencing some domestic abuse or?
Yes, so our emergency shelter is designed to stay anywhere from 1 day up to 45 days. So when someone calls our hotline, if they say they're in an emergent situation and need, to stay at our shelter, we perform an intake with them. It takes about 45 minutes. It is pretty thorough. And then after that, we can check on the capacity because capacity is always an issue, but we always try to offer. So we do have shelter for that. That people typically stay up to 45 to 50 days. If people need to stay for a longer time, we then can offer transitional housing, which is our longer term housing program. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, so we do try to be really cognizant of, if you're not in a safe space to complete it at this time, give us a callback number. We always call from confidential numbers, different numbers, and we always try to make sure that that person can safely complete it. But yeah,
Even getting to that location was very like it was awesome. Like the way for other people not to follow their watch.
yeah. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, there's like a whole process into that so that it's very safe. We also have partnerships with different sheriff's offices to help with the escorting. So yeah, honestly, I work on the outreach side. I don't work directly with clients so much, but almost every time I give a presentation like this, someone will come up to me afterward and share, an experience or with Laura's House or with domestic violence. So it really just underscores that it's such a prevalent issue, but it makes me, really proud to be part of an organization that I think has been part of so strongly in the community for so long. Also, our hotline and all of our advocates, we have bilingual advocates. We have therapists that speak Farsi, Vietnamese, Spanish, and then we also have like translation lines for other languages as well. So we really try to connect with anyone, regardless of background. It's confidential, regardless of immigration status. We can offer services. And yeah, also, just a quick little note, domestic violence does not have to be between, a married husband and wife, any sort of intimate relationship. Doesn't have to be a heterosexual relationship, doesn't have to have kids involved, but it can. We also allow kids into our shelters with their parents. So we try to really be comprehensive in that way.
How big is your staff?
Currently, our full-time staff is about a little over 100. So we're not too big, not too small. We rely a lot on our volunteer hours, which is amazing. So, for example, a way that we kind of keep our services funded beyond just applying for certain grants is we actually have resale stores across the county. So, like thrift stores. So we have one in Costa Mesa, Lake Forest, and San Juan Capistrano. Really cute stuff if you like to thrift. But actually, so we receive over 900 bags of clothes every week to our donation center in Aliso Viejo. And we rely on volunteer hours to sort through all of those clothes and all of those goods. Of course, the first stop would be if any of our clients need or want certain clothes or items, it goes to the shelter first. But of course, we always have a huge excess every week. So all of that excess then goes into our resale stores, and all of the profits from the resale stores then goes back into funding our organization. So we've kind of created this cyclical way. So even if you just want to shop, you can support us. Yeah, they're just called Laura's House resale stores. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions about our services, what we do, our studies, our research, our classes?
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
I just want to say, because this happened to a friend of mine when I was in high school, just yesterday, that domestic violence isn't just male to female, it's also reverse. It can be a guy being abused.
Yes.
His girlfriend, his wife, or whatever.
Absolutely. So that's a great point. And that is something that we talk about in our like domestic violence and teen dating violence overview more so. Our healthy relationship try to focus on like the strategies, but absolutely, when it comes to domestic violence, really what it comes down to is that power and control. For some reason, one person needs that power and control over another, but we see that it can happen. A woman can abuse a man can abuse a man, right? A woman can abuse a woman. Really, it can happen in any form of relationship, regardless of sex, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, ethnicity, language, anything, right? We see it, and we see it in our organization as well, that our clients are extremely diverse because it really can impact anybody, right? So thank you so much for making that comment. Absolutely. Yeah, David.
Yeah, I had a question. While they're having their stay at the shelter, do they receive any sort of resources like job training or therapy?
Yeah, so absolutely. Everyone who's in our residential services of the shelter, they have access to all of our non-residential services as well. So we have therapists and legal advocates and case managers go to the shelter and work with them. We offer community workshops every week to our clients. So that includes like financial literacy Fridays. We have an event every year called Dress Styled for Success, where we sort out our donations of like, professional clothes so that our clients can make sure that they have appropriate dress for job interviews, for finding jobs. So we always try to find these capacity building community workshops. And these are actually available to our clients whether they're in our shelters or not. So you don't have to be in our emergency shelters or in our housing to receive our other services. Anyone can make an appointment that's experiencing domestic violence, can make an appointment with either of our offices and come in to receive therapy, legal assistance being mostly like restraining orders, but we also help people self-petition for immigration status through the Violence Against Women Act. Case management, so helping people enroll in Medi-Cal, helping people find housing on their own. And so we really try to offer a variety of services and try to meet everyone where they're at. So some people may just need a bit of therapy, right? A bit of legal help. Some people may need a longer term housing situation. And that's just no matter where people are at, we try to meet them there. So absolutely, there's a bunch of different services that happen both in the shelter and outside of the shelter. Yes.
Is the services for female only or is it male also?
The services are for male also. The services are for anybody.
And are the males housed separately or?
The shelter layout is sort of undisclosed, but from what I understand, as long as someone is, as long as someone's experiencing domestic violence and there's capacity at the shelter and they need it, we'll give it to them. We always try to honor, obviously, the requests and the comfort levels of our other, people there, but, we honor that for anyone. So how that kind of lays out, I can't really disclose all the details, but we do offer those for anyone. We do try for our, we have different group therapy sessions, so for, sometimes we will maybe separate by gender for, different group therapy sessions and things like that, but that's sort of, yes, we'll serve anybody, regardless of gender, background. The details are a case-by-case basis. Thank you for that question. Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Reagan.
thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So she'll stay around a little bit after. If you have individual questions, please help yourself to coffee or a treat over here. Thank you again for coming. We hope you have a beautiful day. Hopefully it stays dry for a little while longer, and we hope to see you tonight at Mrs. Massey's Memorial Concert. Have a wonderful day and evening.
Thank you. Thank you.